those plans had to be put on the shelf. Okay, plan B. We can't be at Roy Thompson Hall, but we can be here in our beautiful, warm sanctuary. We can be home for Christmas. And so we pivoted. You remember, we started planning 4 special services for the evening of December the 24th, 2021. We worked hard putting those services together. We planned for months. I looked back, and I have email messages from last October where Jeff, Dina, and I were beginning to write the elements of those services, themes and prayers and orders of service that us pastors are responsible for. Now, friends, I don't want to expose too much of the inner workings of our fabulous clergy team, but there aren't too many orders of service that we're working on more than 2 months in advance. Usually it's more like, hey, can you do the opening prayer this morning? Okay, cool. I'm going to go to my office and finish writing my sermon. I'll see you in 15 minutes. But Christmas Eve is a special service, and so special plans were being made. But then, I don't know, that would be a good place for a dun, 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 wouldn't it? But then came the grand disruptor known as the Delta variant. Or maybe it was Omicron. Honestly, even the virus had to go to plan B and plan C. With less than a week until Christmas Eve, Jeff tested positive for COVID-19. A couple days later, I tested positive for COVID-19, and so it was. We made one last pivot, and on very short notice, announced the cancellation of all 4 Christmas Eve services, and we pieced together in their place a digital Christmas Eve service that wasn't at all what any of us expected. But it was really nice, and it was meaningful. This seemingly never-ending pandemic, to borrow the language of Dr. Seuss, hadn't stopped Christmas from coming. It came somehow or other. It came just the same. What do you remember about last Christmas? You want to know what I remember? Everything we planned didn't happen. And everything that happened, we didn't plan. After spending months of time and energy on Plan B, we threw Plan C together in a couple of days. That's what I remember about last Christmas. And so last Christmas became sort of a parable for life in the season of COVID. It became one of the biggest and clearest reminders that we'll ever get that sometimes our plans don't unfold the way we expect. Sometimes cases spike a couple days before one of our holiest nights of the year. Sometimes the weather forces you to change venues at the last minute, and so church on church outdoors in the village becomes church in the sanctuary here at Simpson and Howland. Sometimes your communion bread gets stolen by an Irish wolfhound named Fergus. And sometimes you make all the plans you need to throw a great big wedding party, and you underestimate the amount of wine you're going to need. Now, that's exactly what happened in the sacred story that I read this morning, in the story of the wedding at Cana in Galilee. What started out as an account of failed plans became a story of Jesus' first miracle. Nobody had planned to save the best wine for last, but sometimes, thanks be to God, life doesn't go the way we planned. Now, most of the people in my life, my family, my friends, and especially my coworkers, know that I am not wild about making detailed plans. This used to bother me, but I've learned to embrace it. I hold on to little kernels of wisdom, like Proverbs chapter 16, verse 9, which says, "People do their best making plans for their lives, but God, the Eternal One, guides each step." And I know that sounds a little fatalistic, but I take it to mean that whatever plans we make, there's always something larger than us at work. Or that famous Robert Burns line about how the best laid plans of mice and men so often go awry. Or that quote that's usually attributed to John Lennon, that life is what happens to you while you're busy making other plans. And then there's my favorite. Everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. That's Mike Tyson. someone we don't necessarily think of as a fountain of wisdom, but the man knew boxing. And I'm pretty sure that getting punched in the mouth is like the biggest part of boxing. That's way beyond my experience, but I think it works as a helpful metaphor, you know what I mean? Maybe this is a generalization, but it seems to me that there are folks who want to plan everything, and there are folks who just want to be ready for anything. And I really think the world needs both types of people, those of us who thrive with more preparation and structure, and those of us who thrive with more spontaneity and flexibility. And at best, I think we complement one another. We need one another, even if we drive one another crazy sometimes. Well, we've been sharing lessons for life these past few weeks and months on the theme of celebration. And I hope you'll take it from someone who is not the best planner and someone whose life has not gone the way she planned, that celebrations can and do come together when our plans start to unravel. No, it isn't what we expect. And it isn't what we want sometimes. But there is joy to be found even when we have to pivot. There is grace to be experienced in the unraveling of our plans. Look, says the prophet Jeremiah in the sacred text that Timothy read just a few moments ago, in the letter that the prophet wrote to the exiles. You may be in exile, you may have been forcibly taken from your homeland, but you can still find occasions for celebration, even in this unwelcome season of life. You can still experience the joy of building a home for your family. You can still celebrate the harvest yielded by the garden that you've planted. You can still celebrate the weddings of your children. You can still celebrate as you welcome beautiful little babies into your families. Just because you're not where you want to be, just because life hasn't gone the way you planned, is no reason that you shouldn't celebrate, no reason that you can't celebrate. This is not the life you expected, Jeremiah tells us. But there's still good to be found in it for you and for those around you. Now, maybe your life still feels a little like it did last Christmas. Maybe it feels kind of tenuous. Maybe it feels like things could go sideways again at any moment. Maybe when you look back at the course of your life, or the course of the life that you thought you were on, it even feels a little bit like you've been exiled. A couple of years ago, y'all, I had a closet full of suits, and I was looking forward to a long career in Baptist ministry. Now, maybe you're not on plan A anymore, or plan B, for that matter, or plan C, D, E, F, G, so on and so on. Sometimes you can't help but confess that it is an unsettling time to be alive, an unsettling time to be thinking about the future, an unsettling time to be a faith community. We have so many plans in the works, so many hopes for the next year or so, but we keep getting these reminders that we don't know what's going to happen next. And these days I'm spending a whole lot of time thinking about restarting like every single program at once. Programs like Children's Church and Young Adults Get-togethers, a women's group, seniors ministry, weekly Bible study, community meals, support groups, the 7 p.m. service. Because it feels like we're about to get back to the place where these things can happen again. But then I start thinking about all the planning that we did around Christmas Eve last year. And I think about this year when our full clergy team has only been together and all healthy for about 3 weeks. And I think about a building that is in the middle of major renovations. And oh yeah, there's a pandemic still. And I remember what it feels like to pivot and to cancel and to keep changing our plans and adjusting our expectations. A week or two ago, I was hosting a Zoom meeting to talk about what it might look like to resume the 7 p.m. worship service. I know that's something a lot of folks in our family miss around here, something that we'd love to get going again. And as we got close to wrapping up that meeting, I brought up last Christmas. And I said to folks in that meeting, I want you to picture 2 things in your mind I want you to envision two possibilities. I want you to think about what the 7 p.m. service would look like if we had to do it this Sunday. If we had 4 or 5 days to throw something together. And then I want you to think about what the 7 p.m. service would look like if we had the perfect length of time and the ideal amount of resources, all the volunteers we needed, the ideal conditions for restarting. Think about those two possibilities I invited the folks in the meeting. The scenario where you get to plan everything perfectly, and the scenario where you get to plan nothing. You just throw it together and whatever happens, happens. Now, think of those two possibilities as your white line and your yellow line. Running down the side of the road, running down the other side of the road, because I think our reality is going to be somewhere between those two lines. No matter what we plan, there will be big parts of our plan that will not come together. But even when big parts of our plan come apart, we will adjust. Now, I think that's true for everything we do. It's September, and Christmas is coming. And so is homecoming, and so is children's church, and so is Thanksgiving, and so is the blessing of the animals, and our 50th anniversary in 2023, and the grand opening of our newly renovated social hall and meeting rooms, and a whole lot of wonderful things in the life of this faith community that is MCC Toronto, and in your lives as well. Lots of good things are coming, and none of it is going to happen exactly the way we've planned. Because nothing ever does. But God is always up to something, even when our plans don't come together, especially when our plans don't come together. Beloved, there is joy, there is love, there is grace to be found in the places we find ourselves when our plans don't come together. So let's be kind to one another. Let's keep walking by faith. Let's keep our minds and our expectations open. And let's celebrate one way or the other. Amen.